What's up, guys, and welcome back to the infamous project, day 4 officially of the 4-banger V8 5.0 swap conversion. You can see we got the rear end sitting back down on the ground here. We got our engine bay pretty much all prepped out, ready to take the motor that we got ready towards the end of day 3, which is sitting right here. It's all ready to go. Bell housing is on, transmission's down here. Got our brand new brake booster. Pick that up, so that's ready to get installed, and we've got all our nuts and bolts and parts. Got a new set of plug wires, we got some ATF for the transmission, we got coolant, we got everything. The motor is already full of break-in oil because that is a fresh rebuild, so we're pretty much good to go here. So now we're getting into some of those final little details of what makes a four-cylinder and a V8 car. So we've already talked about the rear diff, we've talked about the fuel lines, we've talked about brake lines that need to be fixed in the back to the distribution block above the rear diff. We've talked about the brake lines off the master cylinder and that we need to swap the booster. There's no difference between automatic and 5-speed as far as pedal assemblies go or anything like that. We've talked about the difference in the cluster, so we need a V8 TAC, and in this case we want 140 mile-an-hour speedo, so we're going to be upgrading those things. But front suspension, so with the smaller brake booster that a 4-cylinder has, it has smaller brakes, and in fact the brakes are the same setup as you would find on a 4i from 79, I believe, right up to 86. They're smaller rotor, smaller caliper. 87, things bumped up a little bit. Alternator wiring is another issue or another aspect of the 5.0 swap you need to be aware of, because the alternator on the 4-cylinder is actually mounted on the driver's side, so the wiring only needs to go from here to here. Now that the alternator is going to be way over here on the passenger side, well, we need to get some wiring that will run along the upper radiator support in a factory-ish location. So I have actually just cut the alternator harness out of the rest of this headlight harness that's in here, so it's all bundled together. There's all the split wire loom and tape and everything else. It's a really good opportunity to be able to clean up your wiring. Now, this is an aftermarket alternator where it's been hardwired in, and a lot of times these connectors break, or sometimes they overheat and they melt, so I can understand why this would be the case. We will still clean all of this up. I'm going to use this alternator because it is pretty much brand new, but like I said, if you take your wiring right up to about here, this point on the harness, we'll cut it off, and from there we'll be able to join it into the old factory one and then have everything extended. We'll use proper connectors and heat shrink and all of that good stuff to make sure we have good connections. And you'll notice that there's multiple wires coming off these two connectors, but by the time you get to the back here, there's only 3. So a lot of these are actually just 12 volts. The green one is actually the one that goes to your gauge and your gauge cluster to let everything know that things are charging. If the connection isn't made with this wire, you'll have a battery light on in your dash. So anyways, we'll cut this out, get this cleaned up, wired in, and then that'll be the last part of the wiring. All right, guys, we got our brand new booster. Even comes with new hardware. Don't know if I've actually seen them come with hardware like this before, but I am not going to complain. Oh. Well, that doesn't sound very good. So today was a little bit of a bust. I had all these intentions of swapping suspension and getting things sorted out, and then some people dropped by and completely threw off my day. So let's start over here. 85 GT T-top. You guys are probably wondering what happened to this car, and I'm gonna have an update for you guys coming. We'll drop another video on this as there's a couple little things I need to do. I'll give you guys a little sneak peek though. Bam, new motors in there. So I'll have an update video going on what's happening with it. And then we're gonna walk over here to where I pretty much can't even walk through my last garage bay anymore because I had a serious drop off of parts happen. So you can see some body kit pieces here, AOD transmission, we got doors, we got T-top glass, we got crazy pieces I've never seen before, Cervini's hoods, whole bunch of Stifler's stuff, all in the back there, and I need to go through all of that. So I'm gonna do a video and share with you guys what's going on there. And you might have heard me mention that doesn't sound good. Well, Charles pulled up in the Celine clone Blue Brother notch, and we finally fixed his vacuum tree. And we actually took the one that was out of this 4-cylinder car, and we used the 4-cylinder tree style, sort of like 93 Cobras do, because it actually worked out really well in terms of the way that those vacuum lines were routed. So did all that. He goes for a test drive. He comes back and he says, I think I broke something. And I guess he was spiritedly driving down our little fancy road course, or S-bends up there that we got locally, and it just popped right out of third gear on him underneath load, and sounds like there's stuff rattling around in the transmission now. So the in is full. I said to him, I'm sorry, man, like the car's gonna end up sitting outside. So he's limping it home right now, and I could hear it like all the way down the road. I could hear stuff rattling around in the transmission. So who knows what that is, but you know what? That's a factory T5 with a fully built 347 with a Pro Charger on it. So it's sort of inevitable that that old T5 was going to let loose at some point. So needless to say, I didn't get much headway done on this car, but the only thing I managed to get done, and it was hard, right? Juggling, you know, I wasn't necessarily with the camera the whole time because I was helping Charles or moving parts, or Bobby came with the 85. So it's been a little nutty, but the brake booster is installed. And now I'm trying to find my brake lines that go from the master down to the proportioning valve that I took out from this car the other day, and I had everything neatly organized. And where do you think it is? In a really safe place that I couldn't tell you, because it's so safe that even I don't remember where it is. I'm sure you guys can relate to that. One other thing that I managed to do was wire up the alternator. So because the alternator wiring on the 4-cylinder goes to the alternator that's here, I needed to redo the wiring and get it so that the alternator, or the wiring for the alternator, can reach all the way to here. So that is all redone. It is wrapped. It's looking good. And the alternator is sitting on the ground because it's actually hardwired. I guess whatever, it wasn't a total loss of a day, but it was a little bit of a loss of a day because I maybe only got an hour at best to work on this. So add one more hour to the docket, and tomorrow, which I think the weather is supposed to be even nicer, which is good, we'll deal with this suspension first thing. And hopefully, as a result, because I got a couple of the little things out of the way, we'll be able to drop the motor in. So it's the next day, but it's still technically day 4 of working on this 4-cylinder V8 swap. And yesterday I just got too distracted to get all the time in to complete day 4. So we're gonna complete day 4 today. Now, last night I went ahead and installed new power steering lines down there. I still need to get the little power steering hoop thing that goes up there. I'll show that to you guys here in a minute. But one thing that I want to point out right now is look at the bushing in between in this area of the steering rack here. So that is not good. I felt that in the steering wheel going back and forth. I'm like, man, is this column messed up or what? So yeah, whatever. That actually looks like hard plastic in there versus a nice rubber bushing like this one here. So I took this out of parts car. It's actually in really nice shape. So we're gonna go ahead and replace this. We know this comes out 5/8, 11/16 because we had the column out. And then there's a little 12.11 millimeter bolt that goes through that clamp for the splines to keep that bolted down in place. So once you get those out, then you can actually hammer that guy up, and then that'll allow you to get everything off the splines here, and then you can pull it back out after. Not very safe. So I got those brake lines on. I didn't find my other ones, so I ended up taking them off of the parts car. So those are all bolted in and proper. We got that steering shaft changed, so now there's no more play in the column, which is awesome. And now I've got that power steering line that I was telling you guys about earlier that I almost forgot about. I'll try and do my best to show you guys what needs to happen, but pretty much it's gonna bolt to right here. So, and there's a hole in the bottom of the radiator support. You see that, this opening right here where my middle finger is? Well, these two lines need to go through that. So needless to say, gonna be doing some maneuvering here. I might just actually take the two bolts holding the condenser in. So you can see here, hopefully we can do some maneuvering. Might need to actually drop this airbag sensor again. Can't catch everything, guys. Sometimes we end up doing things twice, which sucks, but it's reality. So let's see if I can wrestle this guy in there. Our steering stuff sorted out now. We got the new shaft installed, and we got the coolant pass-through line, whatever you want to call it, installed up here, and then had to get the little kind of screw-in retaining clip so we could get the proper bolt in down at the bottom, so of course it doesn't rattle all over the place. So just want to make sure everything was in the right place where it should be. Got the hood prop or hood latch, sorry, release cable, ran that through the inner fender through the top. Nice little trick there. You can pass it through a hole on the back of the strut tower and just kind of run it up through the inner fender and back out there, so you have one less thing coming over your strut tower area there. Do the same thing with the breather hose that comes down this side from the fuel tank to the charcoal canister. And that is pretty much it in terms of wiring, mechanical, all of that stuff that we need to worry about on the underside of the hood. It's done. We're ready to put the motor in. We got our clutch cables ready, our throttle cables ready, the speedo cables ready, all of our wiring is ready, and that's pretty much it. But before we do that, I think I'm going to tackle the suspension real quick here. I'm just going to feel better that the 5.0 suspension's already swapped into the car, and it'll just be one less headache to deal with. So we got our donor car over here, haven't touched it, haven't done any stuff while you guys haven't been watching. I've been trying to document this full and throughout. The only thing that, sorry, I didn't show you guys, which I did, is, and you can't see it right now because the car's dumped down on the ground, I swapped over the quad shock brackets and bolted up the quad shocks in this car. Again, I've said it a million times, if you guys want good drivability on the street and you want a little bit more comfort, keep your quad shocks. They just help stabilize the rear end some. You'll even find you can't trying to get a stock spring out without dropping your quads. You're going to notice it keeps the rear end in place. So quad shocks is a big yes. So moving back on to suspension stuff. So this car, well, pretty dirty, kind of messed up. We've talked about it before. I've got a new set of struts, and in fact, I got a new set of shocks, well, used new, that are going to get swapped into the front and back just so that stuff is upgraded there. But what we need is the spindles off of this car with these brake calipers and these rotors, because these are actually newer in the front. And then we need the flex line that's going to the hard line. So need to pull all of that stuff out. Sway bar, that's another one. We got to pull a sway bar out of here because the 5.0 sway bar is actually thicker than the 4-cylinder sway bar is. So that's going to be coming out as well. And in fact, guys, I've actually considered just swapping the lower control arms, and that way I'll get the ball joints and the spindle already together. So I believe 13/16, 15/16 will be probably the path of least resistance. Another way that you guys could approach this, if you just wanted to swap the whole K-member, you could do that as well. It's all the same, right? So you could undo the bolts and the strut towers and down in the bottom frame rails there where it's coming up by the transmission tunnel. And you could take the steering rack and you could take everything. However, I have more faith in that steering rack than I do in this one that's coated in all types of leaky power steering fluid and everything else. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to take the parts that we need. So once I get involved here, and we'll probably pull the strut off, and that way we can drop the spring out. And from there, I'll assess and see if we want the complete control arm or if we're going to just do the pop the spindles off here and swap them over onto this car. So stay tuned, guys. That's the intro for the video. Are we going to get everything done for this swap in 4 days is the big question. So the timer is starting now, and we're pretty much 3 full days into this at this stage. So can 8 hours pull it off, getting the suspension swapped over, the motor, the transmission, the drive shaft bolted in here, and this car to fire up. Now, I am not by any means saying that this swap would be complete front to back, all of the shakedown and testing and all of that stuff done in 4 days. No, because there'll be a couple days of cleanup, of wrap up, tidying up, and making sure that everything is working properly, making sure that everything is tight, making sure that the car drives straight down the road, and we're still gonna have to bolt an exhaust up underneath the car as well. So that is another component, which I hate exhaust, hate it, hate it, hate it, but hopefully this one doesn't fight us too much. All of the front suspension is out of the donor car, and the brakes, sway bar, springs, everything that we're pretty much going to need to. I even grabbed the tie rod ends off just in case. These boots look pretty good, in case the ones on that car are not as good. We're going to use the best of everything that we have. Rotors came off. One thing that I forgot, you actually can't pull the spindle off with the rotor on, because the bottom part of the control arm here actually catches on the inside of the rotor, which is a little annoying, but it is what it is. We'll wipe some stuff down a little bit more here. Kind of started doing a wipe down with the microfiber, but you know, it's not the prettiest stuff in the world, and this isn't like a restoration or anything like that. This is a functional 4-cylinder swap put together that'll be daily driven. So we'll make sure that you know, the brakes and everything look good there. And well, those rotors are actually in pretty good shape. They're just surface rust from sitting, so that shouldn't really be a big deal. But other than that, you know, the flex lines are pretty much brand new on the calipers, and everything else looked in pretty decent shape. Those are the newer KYB struts that were out of another car that laying around, so the new used ones. So we'll get those in there. And first things first, got to cut a couple coils out of these front springs, and make sure that the car will sit nice. And most importantly, it is a pain to try and put stock springs back in a Fox. So cutting some material out actually helps you get the springs back in. So not only does it look good, but it helps you get the springs back in there. So we'll get that done. We'll start ripping apart the front end of this guy, and then once all that's in there, I'm going to feel a lot better knowing that the hard stuff is out of the way. Honestly, putting the motor and the transmission in is kind of the easy part. So we'll get this done, and stay tuned because that motor will be going in real soon. Coil and a half off of each stock spring. You can see that I believe it's an Eibach sitting there that I've taken a good amount of material off of, and I know that that spring would be too low. So I'm going to do coil and a half with the isolators in. If the car can come down a little bit, then it's easy enough to pop the spring out, take the isolator out, and go from there. But I think that'll be a pretty good stance at the end of the day. So let's start digging into this car, getting its suspension out, get this thing swapped over. One thing that I forgot to do is the clip that holds the brake line in is different on a 5.0 car. So it's much easier to get this bolt out when the strut is not in the way. All right, we have our suspension swapped. Tie rod adjustment's probably going to be required a little bit. You can see this guy is towed in, and that's quite common. Every time I put 5.0 spindles on, I feel like they end up being towed in a little bit. 4 cylinders, probably just the orientation of the tie rod, so not a huge deal. We'll get our quick trick alignment tool, and we'll do a basic alignment on this thing once everything is buttoned up and good to go. So last thing now is tighten up the sway bar. That was swapped over, but it was just kind of loosely bolted in down in the frame rail areas there. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up. I'm going to clean up my mess, and we're about 4:30 here. The sun is going down, but I'm thinking like I'm going to go for it and just get that motor set in here. So there's going to be some button up things. It's not going to happen all in this video. I realize that with the suspension swap and all of the other stuff that we've gone through in this video, going to need a part 5 just to make sure that we can go over everything and in detail, and then get the car running, and then go over those things, because motor in, transmission in, bolt the exhaust up, and a couple little odds and ends, the cluster, that type of stuff. The transmission tunnel, we're gonna have to open that up a little bit more for the 5-speed, because the automatic's actually smaller in there. So that's probably where I'm gonna leave this video for now, and I'm gonna keep going with footage so that way we have the part 5 of the motor going in, and one step closer to firing this thing up and seeing how it does in its Oregon donated form. So it should be fun. Excited to see this thing come to completion in pretty much less than a week's time. So where are we now for time? we got 4 hours into this thing today between the steering and the power steering, that steering shaft, and then pulling the suspension out. If you guys are wondering like how long does it take in terms of swapping suspension and stuff, I'm pretty quick because I've done it a number of times. I'm usually about 30 minutes a corner. So, you know, I probably ripped stuff out maybe a little bit faster, but on average about 30 minutes a corner. So 1 hour pulling stuff out, and that's like cleaning stuff up and all that. So that's probably a pretty good average in the end. And then another hour bolting everything back into this car. So all in all, we're at about 4 hours today. And we had those few hours extra. I'm trying to remember where we were at, but we're pretty much on the cusp of the 4 days. So ran into a few little things that were unforeseen. You know, we talked about doing the engine bay. That ate up some time in terms of painting that up and cleaning up the harness. And I've gone out of my way to like paint up hardware, clean things up. You know, the hood latch is bolted back on now, just to show you guys, you know, like doing little things like this, that takes time. And that's where, when you're doing a whole nut and bolt job on one of these cars, you get a lot of hours involved, and you can swap stuff over quick and dirty, literally, and it'll work. But sometimes there's just things that you need to do. You know, if you're going the distance, you need to, you know what I mean, just paint the bay, wrap the harness if the tape's coming off, paint a couple odd nuts and bolts if you know that they're going to be seen and make a difference. So clean parts before you install them. So that's just kind of my take on it. Anyways, I'm going to finish this here. I'm done rambling. Just kind of wanted to give you guys that context. We'll come back for part 5. We're going to bleed into day 5. Just because of some of the little obstacles and challenges and all that stuff. The swap itself, in essence, has been done in 4 days, right? Like, aside from putting this motor in and, you know, a couple little things, there's a wiring harness in that transmission tunnel that we got to do some pinning on for neutral safety. But like, other than that, if you take away all of the bells and whistles and added-ons and little things that we've done, swap definitely 3-4 days. Thank you again for all your support. I really hope that you're enjoying this little mini series. If you are, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe. If this has helped you save time, save money, save whatever, go ahead and hit that thanks button down there. Everything is appreciated. Until next time, we'll see you here on the Infamous Project.